All right, everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today, I am going to be doing a deep dive into morning sickness and hyperemesis and just kind of going over some of the stigmas around it, what it actually is, and some amazing new research that has come out showing what potentially causes morning sickness, and even further, those severe cases of hyperemesis. But I wanted to start by just kind of talking about some of the stigmas and also like what your doctor might say. So let's say you're pregnant. A lot of times morning sickness can start as early as 5 weeks, as late as 8 weeks, but most women do feel nauseous or experience what they call quote unquote morning sickness at some point during her pregnancy. Usually between 6 and 8 weeks, it's the strongest. For most women, it subsides by 12 to maybe 20 weeks. And then in those unfortunate cases, it can happen throughout all of your pregnancy. So why do they call it morning sickness? I don't know. I can't give you an answer for this because it doesn't happen in the morning, right? Like morning sickness happens any time of day. For me, it was usually later in the day that it would happen or before bed. I know several friends that it happened at night, but they call it morning sickness all the same, no matter when it's gonna strike. The unfortunate thing is, up until this point, they've always said, we don't know what causes morning sickness, and there's not like a quote direct treatment for it. Like there's some homeopathic things that you can for sure try, and I would definitely encourage you to try those first before going to over-the-counter medication. But some people need the over-the-counter medication because it's extremely severe, and you also need to function. And if you can't eat and drink and keep yourself nourished, it's just going to make this problem so much worse. So whatever you need to do to function, to keep those things, to keep yourself nourished or feeling okay, like if you can't eat without taking Zofran, you have to weigh all the pros and cons and risks for yourself and decide what's best for you. And there's zero judgment here. Like I said, we're all trying to survive this. There are some homeopathic things that you can definitely try first if you don't want to go that route and see if they're going to work for you. The thing with homeopathic versus like over-the-counter medication or prescription medication is homeopathic medicine, a lot of people don't understand. They think that they just have to take one dose and that's it. Whereas with other medication, like let's just say like ibuprofen or Tylenol, right? You can take it and you can take 2, and then 4 hours later you can take another 2. For like normal people in everyday life, right? Like if you have a headache. So it's gonna last for a few hours. Whereas a lot of time with homeopathic treatment, you're giving a dose and then 15 minutes later doing another dose, and you do it every 15 minutes for like the first hour and then every hour after that. And so most people like might take a dose and be like, nothing's happening, I'm just gonna take something else. But you have to really read the instructions and follow it and follow through in order to see the benefits. So there's different ways that you can try to treat it. But here's like some of the unfortunate things is a lot of times you're going to your doctor and you're like, I'm feeling super nauseous. And you hear the answers of like, yep, that's pregnancy, or yeah, that sucks. Like hopefully it'll subside in the first trimester. And a lot of times people are discrediting how you feel because women do this every single day, right? Like there's millions of babies born all the time. And so it's just like a part of life. And it's like, if it's a part of life, like suck it up. But that's just it's like so discrediting to how you feel and unvalidating in that moment when you feel like you cannot function. No matter if you just had nausea for like a few days or you had it for weeks in pregnancy, there's moments that strike where you're like, did I make a mistake getting pregnant? Like, this is awful. Like I remember in my first pregnancy getting nauseous and just feeling like if this is how it's going to be, I'm never doing this again. And thankfully for me, it subsided and then you forget about it, right? But I remember having that feeling. And so it's it's very, very valid to feel sick, like, why did I do this? I know so many women who have maybe gone through fertility treatments or had a hard time trying to conceive, and then the guilt that you feel because you're so sick and feeling like, I wanted this baby so bad and now I feel awful, and feeling like you can't really complain about it, or that how you feel doesn't matter. And I just want to say that's not true. People who have never been through it are never going to be able to relate, and it can be extremely debilitating, whether it is hyperemesis or just normal morning sickness. When it hits and you're nauseous and you can't function, you can't keep anything in. Oftentimes in the first trimester, you're also experiencing insomnia. So it can be a huge struggle to get through. So for people listening, I just want to validate you that you can struggle with this and complain about how you're feeling, and it can be very, very true, and you could be feeling like, how am I going to survive this? Did I make a mistake? And that doesn't make you a bad mom. It does not make you ungrateful. That doesn't make you like your experience any less than anybody else's. And for the people who have maybe experienced that and look at other people's pregnancies who didn't, and you're like, man, why couldn't have I had a pregnancy like that? I also want to validate you, because oftentimes in certain worlds in the birthing field, we take so much responsibility. Like, was it something I did? Was it something I ate? Was it like, why is this happening to me? And there's two opposing truths that can be true. Yes, there are certain things that you can do to set yourself up for a healthy pregnancy and to maybe prevent some morning sickness to come. And a lot of that happens pre-getting pregnant. So during the trying to conceive phase, that egg that you're getting ready to conceive takes 3 months, right, of body changes, of health changes to produce the egg that you're going to conceive with. Not produce it, but to maybe potentially, because we're born with all the eggs that we're ever going to have. So not to produce it, but to make changes to the potential health of that egg. We can change our egg health. Men can change their sperm health. So I also want to say that this isn't 100% on the woman, because sperm health is 50% of the equation. So the health of your partner matters too. It matters how they're caring for their body. And if you're going into this depleted, you are definitely going to be setting yourself up for some struggles, versus if you're going in fully nourished, you've been really taking in nutrient stores, you've been replenishing your minerals, you've been really focusing on being healthy for your pregnancy. So that is going to affect some of the morning sickness and some of those things in the first trimester, and it definitely does impact the long-term part of your pregnancy and the health of your baby. But we're just going to talk, for the sake of this podcast, first trimester right now, and specifically morning sickness and hyperemesis gravidarum. So yes, there are some things that we can do pre-conception to definitely set ourselves up. However, there is this rhetoric in the crunchy world, especially like the world that I'm in. So I know that in social media, whatever you're clicking on and watching and exposing to is what you see. So I'm very much in this tunnel of my world. I follow a lot of birth accounts, a lot of health accounts. And so I think that everybody knows this information, but their algorithm is completely different from mine. But there is this rhetoric that it can be very, very damaging in the world that I'm in, that is saying if you were truly healthy and taking care of yourself, you wouldn't have morning sickness. Or there's people that are like, if you just drank raw milk and ate organ meats and, you know, had your yolk coffee and get your sunshine every morning, you would have zero morning sickness, and you definitely wouldn't have hyperemesis. And I'm just here to say that that's not necessarily true. As I said, there's things that we can definitely do to set ourselves up for a successful pregnancy, but there are so many things that can be out of our control, and there are other factors that play into it. So there can be somebody who is extremely healthy and extremely quote unquote crunchy and following all the rules who gets hit with these symptoms. And before I go into that, I'm going to talk about one of our sponsors for this episode. Okay, before I continue, let's define what hyperemesis is. It's Hyperemesis Gravidarum, and it is going to be women who are hit with severe vomiting. So normal sickness in pregnancy is very common. About 8 out of every 10 women feel sick or are sick, potentially throwing up during pregnancy. So either they're going to feel nauseous or vomit or both during pregnancy. And like I said, it happens throughout the entire day. That's just normal morning sickness. For Hyperemesis Gravidarum, it is much worse than just the normal nausea and vomiting of pregnancy. Some of the symptoms include prolonged and severe, so it's lasting, it might improve around 20 weeks, but oftentimes it lasts throughout pregnancy. Dehydration, feeling thirsty, tired, dizzy, lightheaded, not peeing, having dark yellow urine, weight loss, often having to go to the hospital to either get IV treatment for the nausea, vomiting 15 plus times a day, and like I said, not stopping in between, passing out, lightheadedness, but basically it's defined by severe sickness during pregnancy, not being able to keep anything in. And as we all know, you're nourishing a baby, right? So when you feel like you can't function, and then you're also feeling guilty that like maybe you're not getting the nutrients your baby needs and trying to survive. And that's where that preconception phase just really comes in handy, really nourishing yourself, because those nutrient stores are going to really impact your first trimester, whether you have nausea or not. So with the weight loss, sometimes in HG, that can be very concerning. So it is important to like tell your healthcare provider if you are experiencing these symptoms. But often they're gonna realize, like at appointments, if you can't gain weight and when you're talking to them. But it's very also important to find a provider who is validating how you feel. Because as I said earlier, sometimes providers are just saying, oh, that's pregnancy, right? Like you're gonna get nauseous, you're having a baby, this is normal. HG, Hyperemesis Gravidarum, is not normal. So that's definitely something that you want to let them know if it's not improving. So like I said before, 8 out of every 10 women are going to feel nauseous or have morning sickness at some point. But with hyperemesis, it's thought to be around 1 to 3 in every 100 women experience this. So it's a lot smaller percentage. I've heard this term thrown around before, like people saying, oh yeah, I have hyperemesis. But if you can have severe nausea and not hyperemesis. There is kind of categories of this, but that doesn't mean that the way that you feel is not valid. And it doesn't mean that like you're feeling like pregnancy sucks or that you can't get through this. So as I was saying, kind of like in this crunchy world, it's thought that if you are healthy enough, you're not gonna have hyperemesis. If you are healthy enough, you're not gonna have nausea. If you're healthy enough, you're not going to experience X, Y, and Z in pregnancy. And that's not necessarily true. And there are accounts out there that are saying like, I just took, dehydrated liver pills throughout my pregnancy, not even a prenatal, and I never got sick, and I did all these other things. And that rhetoric can be so damaging, and people need to not say exactly maybe what they did for themselves, because every single person is so different. Maybe organ pills worked for one person, but it's not going to work for every person. Our prenatal vitamins have vital nutrients in it that are specifically catered to pregnancy. And if you are just taking a liver pill, you might be missing out on other vital nutrients that are in a prenatal that you need, that you're not getting in your diet. Because of how our world works now, it's very, very hard to get your nutrients through diet alone. Because our soil's depleted, our foods don't have all the same minerals that we have, or that they used to have, so they don't have all the minerals that we need. And we just don't have perfect diets anymore. The world has made it very hard to eat very clean. I'm not saying that it's not possible. It's definitely possible to eat clean, but we also need to know like what's going on with our health and where we're depleted. And I'm just gonna give you a quick example, because I worked very, very hard on being, having nutrient stores going into my pregnancy with Carlo. I was working on balancing my blood sugar with every meal, making sure that I was eating foods that were nourishing my body. I was replenishing minerals. And this might sound like a lot, because this has taken me years to build up to. So just like making one small change at a time, this was over like months, not just like overnight. I'm like, oh, I'm making all these changes in my life. But I worked very hard to be nourished going into my pregnancy. And this pregnancy was pretty hard on my body. I gained a ton of weight, and I didn't feel like I was doing a ton different than my previous ones, but yet I gained a lot more than my previous pregnancies. And so that was hard on my body. But in my third trimester, I ended up doing a nutrient test to see where I was deficient and what my body needed. And the results really surprised me, because I'm taking my prenatal, I'm eating a little bit of organ meat here and there, I'm eating quote unquote clean, I'm, you know, it doesn't mean that like I don't enjoy a dessert or whatever, it's just, I'd say like the 80-20 rule, right? Like 80% of the time I'm eating pretty healthy, and 20% of the time I'm just not worrying about it. Not that I'm not eating healthy, but I'm just like, whatever. So I get the results back, and I'm actually extremely deficient in vitamin A, which is very vital for brain development and all these other things. So of course I start freaking out, thinking like, great, like my baby's gonna come out with issues and thinking the worst, right? But breastfeeding and pregnancy really deplete vitamin A. So knowing this, I'm like, okay, I really need to focus on vitamin A nutrient foods. But most of us aren't getting those like nutrient tests. And I thought that I was doing great, right? And that wasn't the only thing that I was deficient in. I was deficient in a couple other things too. And vitamin A was definitely the worst deficiency. Like I was way low, way lower on the category than I should have been. And so that was like a little nerve-wracking, but it goes to show you that like just these blanket statements doesn't fit every single person. We don't know specifically what exactly our body needs, and so we're all just doing our best. But making blanket statements of just take liver pills and you're gonna have a great pregnancy, and just do this one thing and you're not gonna feel nauseous at all, and that's not necessarily true. So I do want to talk to you a little bit about what can you do, and I'm gonna link in the show notes. I have a first trimester survival guide, and so let's just talk about a couple of natural remedies that you can maybe try that have shown to help nausea. And then we're gonna go over the research that has recently come out saying that like they actually figured out the hormone that is causing hyperemesis and nausea, and it's really groundbreaking research, because up until this point it's been like, we don't know what causes morning sickness, we don't know what causes hyperemesis, and after a couple of studies, they've figured some really cool stuff out. So we're gonna dive into that after I go over this. And it's nice to know that there's a reason. And this isn't just like random, you know, that like, oh, I didn't take liver pills and so now I have hyperemesis. So for nausea, a couple of things that do help is vitamin B6. So talk to your provider about adding vitamin B6 into your diet. Look for it in nutrient sources, or potentially in supplement form, and looking for a good one. I love the brand Seeking Health. They're a great brand for supplements. But I would do some research and maybe talk to them about adding B6 in. What I did this last pregnancy, because I've had nausea in each of my pregnancy, I started taking the B vitamin prophylactically before that nausea would have hit. So around 5 weeks, when I found out I was pregnant, I just added a little bit of extra B in there for a couple of weeks, and it really, really helped me. Since I have experienced nausea in the past, normally between 7 and 8 weeks. So I just added it in because I'm like, I have 2 toddlers and I need to keep functioning. So I added that in early on and felt like it really, really helped keep some of that nausea at bay throughout my first trimester. Getting protein in the morning. So this is a great habit to start before you even get pregnant. And when I was saying I worked on balancing my blood sugars ahead of time, this is one of the things. Eating protein within the first couple hours of waking and trying to get in 30 to 40 grams of protein in the morning. I know that when you're nauseous and you don't feel good, this sounds impossible, but there are sneaky little ways that you can add it in. Collagen. Add collagen to your coffee if you're drinking that. Collagen in a smoothie if you're drinking that. For me, like Greek yogurt was always an easy go-to. Some Greek yogurt with some berries and honey. Greek yogurt is packed with protein. So you can do Greek yogurt with protein in a cup of coffee with collagen in it, and that's like 30 some grams of protein. And that really does help combat nausea and morning sickness, because when your blood sugar is dropping, you're more likely to feel nauseous. So when you're keeping your blood sugar stable, you're less likely to experience nausea. Smoothies and fruit, those are a great way to pack in some nutrients, and fiber, and because constipation can attack in the first trimester as well. But there were days where I was like, I just need to eat. I would eat frozen mango. I would live on frozen mango. Again, if you can balance your blood sugar by having some sort of protein with that, whether it's some peanut butter, yogurt, something. But again, we're in survival, right? It's so much easier to hear people give this advice, and then when you're feeling it and like, or you're doing it and you're like, you don't understand, like I can't keep that down. So I'm just giving some tips here. But I definitely understand like when that can't happen and you're just living on bagels. But hey, if you put cream cheese on your bagel, win, you got some protein and fat in there, right? So still working toward getting some protein and fat in your diet. Prenatal vitamins. So did you know that out of the 97% of women that are taking prenatals, 95% are deficient in vital nutrients needed for healthy pregnancy? So taking your prenatal is definitely a way to make sure you're getting in all these other nutrients that your body needs. You guys all know that I love the brand Needed. I'll put a link in the show notes, but they also have a powder form. So if you are at a point that you're like, I can't swallow pills, like I can't do this right now, I love that Needed has 3 different options for you. They have their regular prenatal, which is 8 capsules, which I usually take. And people listening or people that I tell about them, they're like, 8 pills, like there's no way. Well, they also have their Just the Essentials one that's a little bit cheaper, and it's 3 capsules, but it's packed with the vital nutrients that like you often don't get in your diet. So that's a really great option. And then they have their powder form that you can add to a smoothie, and that you're getting your nutrients in. You're like, I can't do this. So they have a vanilla protein powder that you can add, and like I said, I'll put a link in the show notes because I have a 20% off code with them. And then another thing for getting through this is not just hydrating, but replenishing your minerals. You've heard me say that phrase like a few times throughout this, and it's something that I learned like in this last year, was about minerals and how, again, like our soil is depleted and we're not getting everything that we need. So replenishing those minerals is very important. How do you do that? Getting a high quality sea salt. I love Redmond sea salt. And in the morning, you can mix a little bit of coconut water and a pinch of sea salt in it, and you're getting magnesium, you're getting the sodium you need, you're getting some other good nutrients in there, potassium, or even getting electrolyte powders. There's very few that have really great stuff in it. I like the Needed brand. They have a lime and a grapefruit. And then LMNT, my husband likes those ones. And then the other brand that I love, again, is the Redmond's Relight. So that's my go-to mineral powder. And they actually have an ingredient in there that helps shorten labor as well. So I got that before I went into labor, and that's when I discovered I actually really love that electrolyte drink. So they have the individual sticks or just the powder you can scoop out, but those are 3 brands of electrolytes that I love. I know that there's some discount codes for the LMNT and the Redmond sea salt out there. I don't have one, but I think that if you Google it, you'll be able to find like a discount code for them. Actually, I might have one for LMNT, and if I do, I'll link it in the show notes. But replenishing your minerals is going to be vitally important. Trace minerals, there's also like a trace mineral mix that you can add to your water that can also really, really help. And I've definitely noticed a difference drinking electrolytes. So those are just a few things that you can do to help combat nausea. And I'm going to talk about the research that came out, because it's, like I said, really groundbreaking and really cool. But before we do that, we're going to hear from one more of our sponsors. Okay, so let's dive into this research. I'm going to be reading some of the article to you and talking you through it a little bit, because there was recently a joint study done by the University of Southern California and the University of Cambridge, and researchers zeroed in on a hormone that is key to understanding more about morning sickness, and the hormone is called GDF15, so GDF15. It's a hormone that's already naturally present in our bodies, but when you become pregnant, it's kind of takes center stage when the placenta wraps up the production of this hormone. And the study states that we confirmed that higher GDF15 levels in maternal blood are associated with vomiting in pregnancy and HG. So the surge of this hormone is associating with the familiar feelings that we've already been talking about of feeling nauseous, and it's all due to this hormone. So the reaction to this hormone varies among women, ranging from those who have experienced no nausea to others experiencing the hyperemesis and even requiring hospitalization. So the study reinforces that GDF15's role in pregnancy sickness, and it sheds light on how a woman's sensitivity to this hormone can dictate the severity of her symptoms. Women exposed to lower pre-pregnancy levels of GDF15 tend to experience intense symptoms. So if this hormone was a little bit lower in you before you got pregnant, now all of a sudden it's producing more, you're more likely to experience that extreme change in those extreme symptoms. The study also points to genetics as a key factor to this. A rare mutation in a gene responsible for the production of this hormone can lead to abnormally low hormone levels, putting women at a higher risk of experiencing hyperemesis during pregnancy. This genetic interaction between the mother and the fetus offers insight into why some women may experience severe symptoms in certain pregnancies, but not in others. That's very interesting, right? Like, you might have hyperemesis in one pregnancy and not another. So that's the interaction between you and the fetus, and maybe a genetic component that is affecting the production of this hormone. So let's look and see what they say about, can morning sickness be cured now that we kind of have an answer for what is causing it? The research's team is going to be exploring whether exposing women to GDF15 before pregnancy can mitigate or prevent nausea and vomiting, potentially revolutionizing the treatment landscape. Initial efforts are being made to investigate the safety of metformin, which is a drug known to increase GDF15 levels in individuals with a history of hyperemesis gravidarum. So gravidarum, I always say gravidium, it's gravidarum. So if you haven't heard of metformin before, that can also be used in like fertility treatments or people struggling with trying to conceive. But there definitely are some risks to it. One of the leading members of the research team who personally suffered from hyperemesis expresses hope that these findings will pave the way for effective treatments, sparing future mothers from the ordeal that she and many others have faced. So that's really cool, right? So it's linked all to this hormone that is going to be producing much more during your pregnancy. And if you had lower levels of this hormone before you got pregnant and all of a sudden you have a bunch more, you're more likely to experience hyperemesis or severe morning sickness. What's cool about this is that they're actually running these studies on women. Like, it took how long for them to figure this out, like versus just like people are having babies every single day, morning sickness happens, it's a part of pregnancy. And that's just been our answer for our bodies for so many things. It's periods, you just get periods, and pregnancy, these things just happen. But we know that if these things were happening to men, if men were experiencing hyperemesis on the level that women do every single day, there would be a cure for this, no doubt. And yes, I'm gonna get on my pedestal really quick, because did you know that just last year they started testing women's menstrual products with actual blood? They've never tested tampons with actual blood before. It's been some lab solution or that Kool-Aid that they use in commercials. Like, they're not even testing certain things on our bodies to see if it works. And we've been using these products for years. It's like being a woman in 2024 is like, oh, we're starting to be tested on. Like, they didn't even run medical studies on women until I think it was the 90s. And so many symptoms go missed in women versus men, because men's bodies were studied for so long. Like, the signs for a heart attack for a man and a woman look completely different, and they often go missed in women because the research isn't there, because they just study male bodies and what happens when they have a heart attack. Our bodies are very different, and we need completely different research. If men were getting endometriosis, there would be a cure. If men were getting PCOS, there would be a cure. But no, they aren't. So women are taking these studies into our own hands, finally figuring out things for our bodies. And yes, I had to go on my pedestal there because it's just so frustrating. But I'm really excited that they are looking at these things and that there are some answers. And now that you know this information, I don't know how to move forward to it, but knowing that if you experience hyperemesis and you have this, this reaction to the hormones, to the GDF15, that it's not your fault. Like, you didn't do anything to cause this. You didn't take your liver pills. You didn't do everything perfect. Guess what? Nobody's doing everything perfect. But knowing that you could have this, I feel like can also relieve some of that self-blame. Because also as women, a lot of times we tend to self-blame when things happen. Like, oh, I didn't do this right, I didn't do that. I'm even doing it in motherhood. I can't remember what I was doing the other day, but I caught myself just self-blaming over something silly and small. And but knowing that we're all doing our best, and now that we're discovering more information, we can learn and grow together. We're doing our best, but we should always also strive to continue educating ourselves so that we can do better for our children, do better for the future generations that are coming. because we've been in a cycle of doing a lot of harm for future generations, and not setting them up for necessarily success, which is also why fertility rates are so high right now. It's things that our grandparents were doing, that they were exposed to. If you didn't hear the episode, which I'll link in the show notes, with Dr. Katie, we talked about this, that there's things that our grandparents did that are affecting fertility now, and they had no clue. Obviously, it wasn't intentional, but you can actually start to repair some of that for future generations. This is a whole nother episode, but there's some researchers that are saying that by 2045, sperm counts are going to be zero. The amount of viable sperm that can be usable is zero because of how drastically fast it's decreasing, which is extremely scary. So we have to do our part to impact those future generations, and set our kids up for success. And that starts by taking responsibility for ourselves now. I know that I'm saying like a lot of mixed things. I'm like taking responsibility for this, but hey, this isn't your fault. And both are true. As I said toward the beginning, there's two opposing conflicts. So we can take responsibility for what we can, but also realize some things are out of our control, and that's okay. And it sucks also. So if you are dealing with hyperemesis, if you dealt with it, hopefully you have some peace that there's a reason, and that they're working toward a solution, and that you didn't do anything wrong. This isn't your fault. And also that you need to be believed. Oftentimes you're not believed, not only by yourself, or not yourself, people in your life, but your providers. But again, even more so people in your life, when you're trying to explain to your partner how crappy you feel, or people around you, and they're like, oh yeah, pregnancy's tough. And you're like, no, you don't get it. I feel like I'm dying. Just know that you are not alone, and that you're completely validated in your experience. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. I'm going to be linking everything in the show notes for you guys, so it's easy for you to find. And then make sure that you check out the first trimester survival guide and sign up for the waiting list for the course that's going to be launching soon. All right, have a great week.